Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mr. Saucedo's YouTube videos. Today, we're going to be talking about bacteria and viruses and whether bacteria and viruses are all, bad. Um, First things that you need to know here, or first thing, sorry, not things. Many bacteria and viruses are good and useful for humans. Some of the most common examples are obviously antibiotics. Antibiotics are a quote unquote good form of bacteria that can be used to kill a quote unquote bad kind of bacteria. Obviously, we have plenty of pills that we can take that contain antibiotics in order to, get rid of um, pretty nasty infections. Vitamin K helps to clot your blood, and it's made by bacteria in your intestines. And it's bacteria that, um, you know, by if our body were to attack that type of bacteria, our blood wouldn't be able to clot properly. So it's an extremely necessary bacteria. And it's kind of crazy that there's an entire vitamin that we actually need that is just manufactured by microscopic bacteria in our gut. Um, Another one, obviously, some viruses are used by doctors to insert functional genes into sick patients' DNA, and that is also super new and super cool. We can utilize, since viruses are so good at giving your cells instructions secretly to have them do things, that we can use them to our advantage. And we are using them to our advantage. And this is kind of like gene therapy, which is kind of cool. First, let's talk about infections, though, right? Like, what is an infection and all that stuff. So, an infection is just the infiltration of a body, and that can be animal, plant, etc., by a foreign microorganism. And so, a foreign microorganism is called a pathogen. And infections can be caused by four major things. Obviously, viruses are one of the big ones. So, what is a virus? A virus is an infectious particle of DNA or RNA that's covered in a protein coat. And so, generally speaking, when people think of viruses, they think of these kind of like little spiky ball things. And that is one shape that viruses can have. Bacteria are the second major, infection causing pathogen that most people will think of. And they are just prokaryotic organisms that can cause some infections sometimes. Again, not all viruses are bad, not all bacteria are bad. One that you've probably never heard of, though, is called a viroid. And so, viroids are pathogens that contain RNA without protein coats, and they pretty much just infect plants. Remember, plants don't have really an immune system. And not only do they not really have an immune system, they don't have lysosomes. So, if they do end up getting infected, one of their major and only strategies is basically just to cut off the supply. So, like, oh, great, this leaf is infected. Stop giving that leaf water. And so the leaf will just fall off, something like that. They don't really have a lot of good ways of dealing with infections. And then last but not least are prions. Prions are pathogens that are only made of proteins. And these are proteins that cause other proteins to fold incorrectly. And so what you can end up with is, here's the shape of something, and then you get a little protein that, gets stuck in there. And now it has a totally different folding pattern, different shape. And so that causes the protein that was originally a part of you to not be able to do something or to function incorrectly. So, what exactly are viruses, right? Um, First thing you need to know is that we've known about viruses for a while. We've known about them since the early, or I guess I should say the late 1800s. I was going to say the early 1900s. And so Martinus is the discoverer of viruses. And virus literally means poison in Latin. And so it's a very apt name for something that can cause so much damage. And so it's not considered a living thing. Okay, remember, we've been talking about characteristics of living things for like the entire last two semesters. And viruses don't have all of those characteristics. They're not made up of cells. That's one of the, first ones that comes up. They don't have the ability to reproduce on their own. But we do like to classify viruses with their own kind of genus and species classifications. So you will see that. And that leads people to believe that they might be living things because, oh, we have a genus and species, Homo sapien. And, viruses have a genus and species, but they're not necessarily equivalent. They do need a host cell or a living thing in order to reproduce, which is one of the main reasons why they're not considered a living thing, other than the fact that they're not actually made up of cells. So, what kind of structure do viruses have? Well, all viruses are covered with a protective protein coat that we call a capsid. And so, capsids are made out of different types of protein coatings. And inside of their protein coating, all viruses have a piece of DNA or RNA. And so it's very interesting because we were just talking about what? The big unanswered questions in biology. It seems like viruses may have been around earlier than even, bacteria. And you might think, but they can't reproduce unless, how does that work? Which came first, the virus or the bacteria? And the reason why is because it's really just a protein coating in a piece of DNA or RNA inside, and that's about it. That's all it is. And so that's fairly simple to probably accidentally get manufactured. I mean, again, we don't know. But the fact that there are a bunch of viruses out there and some of them only attack bacteria. So if they were to, come into contact with an animal cell or a plant cell, they wouldn't be able to do anything. But if they come into contact with a bacteria's cell or bacterium, uh, if they were to come into contact with their cell wall, they would be able to um, affect them. And so I always thought that was kind of interesting. So capsids do come in different shapes. We have enveloped and helical. So envelope shapes are kind of spherical. They kind of look like this. Helical ones kind of look like a cylinder. The little spiky bits, these little things here, these are, little protein spikes and little other interesting little bits that you don't really need to draw on your general shapes, but you get the idea. We got envelope, we got helical. We've also got polyhedral and mixed. So polyhedral are not necessarily spherical. Instead, they form polyhedrons. They have this kind of like, sharp little sides to them, like these little hexagonal shapes. Mixed is anything that doesn't really fit in the previous category, or it can be a combination of all of them. So these are bacteriophages. They have kind of this little polyhedral head part. They have kind of this little helical area. They have these little legs sticking out that are also kind of helical in a way. And so they're definitely an example of a mixed capsid shape. And that's it. So if you have any questions, let me know.